Hello all, welcome to the Consistently OK podcast, a podcast where we dive into all things pop culture related from comics to films and everything in between. My name's Luke.
I'm Nick.
Join us every week for a podcast that doesn't set its bar too high or too low, but rather keeps it at a consistently OK level for your enjoyment.
Cool.
It's going to be okay, Nick.
It's all
We've got
good.
this.
Okay.
We're just two guys that generally talk shit about comics. So,
Cool. Okay. So this week we're going to talk about The Last of Us Part 2. But before we get into that, we thought we'd sort of just introduce ourselves a little bit. So I'm Nick. I'm a writer. I write primarily comic books. I've dabbled in prose, but my series Snow the Dawn can be found on Comixology if you want to take a little look at it.
So my name's Luke. I'm the manager of a comic shop, and I've written a few comics as well myself, which I've enjoyed very much. And I just generally love everything to do with comics, films and games, which is the reason that we're doing this podcast, really, because we want to get our views across about those subjects.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was also one of the things that we were saying, that we text each other so much just about pop culture nonsense.
All the time.
That we just thought, okay, it's probably time we start a podcast. But for me especially as well, and this is sort of where it started recently, is playing The Last of Us. So this is pretty much going into it now. But the minute I finished it, actually no, maybe halfway through it, I was starting to think there's so much I want to talk about with this game. It's just on so many levels, and there's so many themes and visuals and the score. There was just so much that I was sort of texting Luke, but trying not to spoil things. So it was sort of like, how far in are you to discuss
But
this?
you can't even judge. I've said to you and several other people that I've been messaging, it's so hard to pinpoint where you are without doing any spoilers, because it's such a big game, but there is so much that goes on in it. It's huge. And like you said, possibly there's one thing every hour you play in it that could be a spoiler.
Yeah. I was trying to, I can't remember when I texted you it, but another friend was playing it as well at the same time. And I was trying to just go by weapons as like a way to do it. So I was
Smart.
like, have you got the bow yet? Just to kind of like like to work out where they were, because I was like, that's not too much for a spoiler.
But then you see, we should have said, we should say now that there are going to be lots of spoilers.
Oh yeah.
That is typically.
Yeah.
So
luckily we haven't got into that territory.
if you weren't expecting there to be a bow in The Last of Us Part 2, then Nick has ruined that for you already.
Yeah, sorry about
because I was about to mention I was going to say about the flamethrower. Like,
oh yeah,
I didn't know that was going to happen, because there's no point that Ellie would have a flamethrower that I could come across anyway when I was playing it. And then if you'd said that to me, I would have been like, what is going to happen in the future?
Yeah. Difficult. But yeah, that was sort of my thing. And then I remember texting you about it, and I think I had like 3 texts off you where you were like, I think I'm near the end of Seattle. I was like,
yes,
cool.
Seattle.
So vague, the whole game.
Because I generally thought, because when you see the chapter screen, it's like quite a blank slate, and then you think, right, there's going to be a lot of chapters. So I was in Seattle day 1, and then day 2. I was like, well, this can't be just day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So my assumption was like, once I get past day 2, then Seattle's done probably, and we'll go somewhere else. But no, then it was like Seattle day 1, 2, then it was like Seattle. God damn it, I'm never out of it. But I said to one of my other friends who was playing the game and enjoyed it a lot as well, that I thought I was at near the end as well, and he was like, an hour after saying that to him, he was like, I finished. And I was like, oh great, it's like I must be right round the corner. And I had another 4 or 5 hours to go.
Yeah.
So
so before I go into the kind of like bulk of the stuff we want to talk about, I think let's just go in on a base level and say, did we enjoy the game?
Well, I'll start and I'll answer that question. I love the game. Like I've definitely more people that I've spoken to in the last month. Has it been out a month now? Must have been a month, I would think.
Yeah, over a month, because I think it
over
launched
a month
before Tsushima.
Yeah, so 2 weeks. Over a month now, probably a little bit later by the time this goes out. But
yeah,
and more people have not liked it than have liked it, according to them. And some of them haven't even played it. They've just downright written it off because of some things that go on in the game and early reviews. But I loved it. I thought it was the complete game in terms of like from the first game, which I loved as well, but it complemented that very well. And the gameplay was fantastic. The story was super emotional. I don't think a game has ever taken me on so many, like so much of a roller coaster in terms of how I feel, whether it's positive about a character and then 5 hours later I'm insanely negative towards that character and wishing they would die. But yeah, I loved it. Like I find it, I kind of understand people's reactions and we'll get into that, but I thought it was a great game. Like I would give it 10 out of 10 all the time, and hence why I would play it again straight away. Is even though I enjoyed it the first time, I think I could even enjoy it as much the second time. So I loved it.
Yeah, I'm much the same, in case that wasn't obvious by the fact that I needed to
talk about it.
Start a podcast to talk about it. I'm playing through New Game Plus at the moment, just trying to platinum it. And so last night, the elephant in the room, I did the whole Joel death scene.
What?
Spoilers. And it's really interesting playing through that kind of opening segment, knowing Abby's story. Like knowing Abby's story that leads her to that moment of bumping into Joel, and also going, oh, Joel saves her. Like she's getting kind of like attacked by the infected, and then Joel saves her. And then, hour later, whatever, she's shooting him in the knee and going to beat him with a golf club. And I was like, it's really hard in that moment to kind of go, but I still like Abby, because it's done so well. It's written so well. It's directed so well. Graphically, it's just insane, all the facial expression. And the way that she kills him is just absolutely brutal. That I was again in that same feeling I was where I first played it. I was like, oh, Abby, how could you? But then I started thinking about it, that I was like, oh, okay. So much of this game is about symmetry. It's the symmetry between Abby and Ellie. And it was interesting to me to kind of go that Joel saved Abby and then Abby kills Joel. And then her journey is post doing what she set out to do. She got revenge, and it's then, okay, I need to figure out who I am without this revenge.
Yeah.
And Ellie is similar in that she goes off on this revenge thing, kills, all of Abby's friends, doesn't get to Abby because Abby just overpowers her. And so then when you get to Santa Barbara and Ellie's going to save Abby, it's that symmetry again. It's like, oh, the person who was like problematic to Abby in some way is again saving her. But this time you get to Ellie to try and go, and when you get to the two boats, you're like, Ellie, you've got to move past it. You've got to let it go.
Get over it.
You've saved Abby. You don't have to do this. But she still goes back and does it. And, you get why there's the trauma and the need for it. But it's interesting then to kind of end the story for Ellie in a different way to Abby, because Abby has led her entire moment up to killing Joel. He saves her and she still kills him. Ellie saves Abby, but then she decides not to kill her. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's
that's the difference between them, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
It's Abby's the way Abby with Lev, the I guess kind of adopted child of Abby eventually.
Yeah.
That's her, like that's what she doesn't have anything like that in her life necessarily. Like she had a dad obviously, but way past that, like she doesn't see the good in, like Ellie does see the good in people.
Yeah.
Like obviously in Joel and a girlfriend and everything like that, but it's very late on you see Abby really care so much about anyone else other than her revenge. You don't feel any connection with Abby overall until she does have love, because if you could take Abby in that moment at the end in the water, but if you put her after that with Joel, I think Abby would let Joel go.
Well, yeah.
If that makes sense, that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to put into words.
And I think so much of it comes down to, like, we'll get into the playing as Abby in a minute because there's so much to talk about there. I think that's a really interesting kind of second half of the game. But the moment that I thought was really interesting for Abby is that she goes to kill Ellie, like in the theater. She's, going to kill Dina. She could kill Ellie right there. And it's Lev that's like, what are you doing.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of like her realizing there's so much more to this than just this revenge thing. Like life is going on.
If you put Abby in that situation, in that is it like a hotel or a lodge, I guess it is, where she kills Joel.
Yeah.
If you imagine she had like someone like Lev, people were telling her not to do it, but it was a different mindset for Abby then. But what my thing is that if you could flash forward to all the stuff that happens to Abby, and you put Joel on the floor again, then if someone had said to her then, like Lev did when Ellie was on the floor, it's like, don't. Like, she would have walked away.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the story here. The story is she just killed Joel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we hate her for it.
And just to kind of address that, like, I was thinking about it the second time playing through it, that, you know, there's all the controversy surrounding Joel's death, that people are annoyed that you sort of play as his killer and stuff. And I can understand it the first time you go through it, because it's really jarring to kind of go, oh God, I played as the person leading up to the death, and then I play as the person after the death. I'm surrounded by this person that did something. But when you learn that Abby is a Firefly, that makes so much sense. Like, the story clicks in. It's not like she was just some random smuggler that he had crossed or something. It was like down to the biggest decision that I think Joel made, and it's the retribution for that.
But even Ellie is annoyed with Joel's decision. So if Ellie's annoyed with Joel's decision, then of course Abby's going to be annoyed with Joel's decision. Yeah. But the thing with the bit when you constantly go back to the hospital, in it's like a flashback almost, and you start in the corridor and you work your way through to where the dad gets killed.
Yeah.
But that is also, as that progresses, like there must be 5 or 6 of those moments. But each one you kind of like you know a little bit more, so you understand that moment when Abby goes in that room and sees her dad dead. You're like, oh, okay, your dad's dead. That's not good. But then you're like, oh my God, like dad's dead. Like this means so much to her, and she had this whole world behind her. Like with her, you know, she was dating Owen at that point when she was younger, and the dad when they were trying to save the animal from the barbed wire.
Yeah, like
those kind of moments, like Ellie and Joel moments, aren't they? In a way.
Yeah, that whole segment as well. That's sort of, I guess, the first turning point for Abby. Like when I think that is the first. I could be wrong because I've not got there, but I think that's the first time you play as Abby again after Joel's death. I think
the first time you play of her is you have the theatre confrontation bit.
Yeah.
And she shoots Jesse.
Yeah.
Or Lev shoots Jesse, actually, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I can't remember. One of them. And then you go into the chapter that's called Tracking, which is when you're tracking, trying to find the animal, trying to find the dad.
Yeah, and that's got such a, like you were saying, the humane moment. And you start to then go, oh, okay, maybe there's more to Abby than I first thought. And then it's sort of just, it becomes the player agency of the way that you play as Abby, I think really starts to, like I started to get more immersed with her. Like the bit where you're going across the rooftops and it's like she's afraid of heights and Lev's like, it's fine, just keep going. You go higher and higher. That whole segment, I was just kind of terrified. Yeah. Like, I'm not afraid of heights, but playing as Abby, I was suddenly like, oh my God, this is really high up. And
yeah, it is. Yeah. But, that bit, even just visually as well, that bit was fantastic. You could feel, and that's another thing we've said a lot of times when we've talked before doing this about the visuals and you felt the tension of being on that segment going up and before you fell through.
It's one of those things that I think, because I played it with my boyfriend next to me, so he was sort of watching the whole story, and it was interesting. Like when I first started playing as Abby, I sort of said to him, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm feeling this. I'm sort of missing all the upgraded weapons I had as Ellie, and sort of just missing the nimbleness of Ellie, and like trapped mines and stuff like that. I had a routine that I was like,
a routine, like I had a routine with Ellie as well. You throw a bottle in, you lower them out, but you set a bunch of trap mines.
And I was like, I need that. And then the more and more I started playing as Abby, both of us sort of said, we were like, oh, we almost are more interested in Abby's kind of journey, because it was the what happens after the revenge. It's how do you get back to some state of humanity, whereas Ellie, you sort of realize, is on this like you're never going to let it go until she's dead thing.
Yeah.
And you kind of go like, there is so much more at play than just the revenge. And you know, it is really tragic Joel died, like it absolutely sucks, but also he made that decision, like that was going to happen.
Let's talk about Joel then. Well, because that's the biggest bit, obviously, and we can circle back around, which we're going to have to do with me. There's a lot of people obviously didn't think it was the right move. They think they got like screwed over by Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann for like portraying that he was saying he was going to be in it and he was in the trailer, which I just think is absolute nonsense, because trailers are trailers at the end of the day. How many film trailers do we see these days where they shove in bits and they're never used, or they edit things out last minute? And there's no hint in the trailers that really said Joel was a playable character.
No,
that I saw. For me, it's always been Ellie's story. It was Ellie's story in the first one. It's all based around her. I would understand this one being about her now. And if they do a third one, which I really hope they do, and they don't shy away from it, from all the criticism, which I can't imagine they would.
Yeah.
It should be about her as well. But the thing about this story, why it's so good, and everything about it, from every scene that interacts with each other, and the times you're in the aquarium with Ellie, and then it's with Abby, and then everything is like you have the flashbacks and all this. Without the Joel dying part, it wouldn't be the same. That is the key, obviously, to the whole thing. It's Abby's story and Ellie's story, and that's the thing. Everyone's saying about Joel not being involved. If you're just upset because you didn't get to play as him, that's just I don't understand it. But he's the whole story. Like that, everything centers around that part, and that's the influence that he has on the story. That is the key thing. Like without Joel, that story is nothing, obviously, and it wouldn't be the story. But he's in it. He's in it so much as well. Like, you know, I knew once he died, I thought, okay, this, because in the back of my mind when I was playing, I was like, right, this is what people are going to be annoyed about, that Joel's dead, and you're probably going to get to play him. But then you have the fantastic bit in the dinosaur park. I know it's not the same as going around, but you still have moments with Joel, don't you?
Yeah, like that was
Shamblers and everything. So
that was something I was going to mention as well. Is I've just done that. Like I've just finished day one on New Game Plus, and going through the whole museum sequence, it's so impacting the way that they do that, because there's not really a fight. Like you chase that kind of like boar warthog thing, but it's not a fight. Like there's no infected around. The whole thing is just about Joel and Ellie connecting.
Yeah.
And through a variety of different ways, you know, talking about dinosaurs, and then there's the space bit with the capsule, which is incredible. That whole scene.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? That's the thing.
It's amazing.
And that bit there, the thing for me is that it's the way Joel looks at Ellie during that.
Yeah.
As in, because you obviously remember, he's lost his daughter in the first game.
Yeah.
That's even before really any of the affected were a major threat. Like they were obviously starting up, and you know she got killed. But that's perfect storytelling for me, because you feel so sad that he's gone, but you can see that Ellie also, there's that moment where she almost feels so comfortable and so happy, and they're so content in that little rocket ship.
Yeah.
But you know, obviously everything's gone to shit.
Yeah.
Down the line anyway.
Yeah. But and that's kind of one of the things I was thinking of, is that I know part of this criticism came from the fact that a lot of people feel like the writers did Joel a disservice by having him let his guard down to help out Abby in his last moment, which I feel like they're just the people that haven't played the game. They've seen a leak or clip or whatever. Because when you play the game and you have moments like that, like the whole space scene and the dinosaur scene, that's Joel completely letting his guard down. I don't think Joel from, you know, midway or the start of the first Last of Us would ever do that, because he'd be, you know, watch the corners, looking out for infected constantly. It wouldn't be a kind of, I'm going to take Ellie out the day to this place. There's certain sections of it I haven't covered, so I don't know what's there, but I'm still going to do it because it means so much to her. And I think that's the thing, is there's, you know, was it a 3-year, 4-year gap between the end of the first one and the
Yeah, I think it's something like that. Or is it? Maybe it's 5 years.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of time for your character to change. Like,
and well, for Joel as well, you got to think the change he's gone through from going from, obviously he wasn't with his brother and everything during the first game, or for a long period of time before that. They only kind of reconnected a little bit during the first one. You know, he's found this girl. He's done something huge in terms of this. Ellie could have obviously saved the world effectively with dying to save the world with the doctor. And I think Joel's probably pretty humble, isn't he, in a way? Because he knows the decision he made. He's obviously hiding it from Ellie, but he's in a community with family, safe. He's keeping everyone safe still by doing patrols. He's probably training people to do it. And he, you know, of course you're going to change, aren't you? Like, you know, you can see his from his house and stuff like that. Like he's made it probably as best he can in that respect.
It's the impression that he's settled. You know, he's no longer living that smuggler life of, you know, almost always on the run, living in like a rundown kind of place. He's really kind of almost content with who he is, despite this massive decision he made. And the thing that whole segment does really well, like the first kind of flashback, is it ends on them finding the image of the Firefly, and then it says liars or liar or whatever it is. And it's that kind of reminder that you're like, no matter how many moments they have together, Joel and Ellie, that are really nice and beautiful, there's always going to be this underside kind of pin to it, which is Joel lied to her. And it was a enormous lie. And that sort of the last shot of that segment being the Firefly image, it's just, it hammers it home that you kind of go, oh yeah, that's something that's always going to be in their relationship. And it's something that, you know, that whole thing does set up the sequel. So the controversy wise, I don't get it, because I think you have to play the whole game to critique it in any way. And I'd be amazed if those people who critique it have played to that point. Like, you know, playing the whole of day one. You know,
I mean, that's so for me as well. If you think about the first game, it's definitely an Ellie story, but you play as Joel for the majority of the time. And even in that game, like when you have in the first one, you have Ellie in the snow. You know, when you have the creepy guy, the cannibal guy, stuff. And I enjoyed playing those Ellie segments, but the majority of this game, a big part of it is Ellie and then Abby. But I mean, can you imagine if they do a third one, it's Abby's story?
Yeah,
Jesus, there'd be no chance, would there?
I'd
stand for it, but I'd be up for it.
I'd be so up for it, because, like, I think by the end, I'm really torn as to like where I want the story to go, because
where do you want it to go, Nick?
I don't. This is kind of what I'm thinking. At the end, seeing Ellie kind of walk off, and you're sort of like, you know, does she go back to Jackson? Does she go off on her own? You know, what's the sort of the trajectory for her, I guess, post all this happening?
I have a theory.
Oh,
here it is.
Okay,
brace yourself.
I'm ready.
I think I've interrupted you now. But
no, go for it. I'm holding my train of thought.
I think that she doesn't go back to Jackson. This is what I would think would happen. She doesn't go back to Jackson. I would think she goes off on her own, but eventually she does run into the Fireflies again. Abby is with the Fireflies, and then it's more of a story about them working out that there were either others like Ellie, or they worked out a way to do something to save the world, but with Ellie not dying.
Yeah.
But however they're going to do it, they have to go through hell again, obviously. And there will probably be people that don't. I mean, the gangs in the games and stuff, and the people that there are going to be people that don't want the world to go back to the way it was either.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would probably be a bit like I'm going to say their name wrong now, Seraphites in a way.
Yeah.
Because they looked at it like a cleansing, didn't they? Effectively.
Yeah.
So I would think there would be people there that think this is like the natural way of the world, and like any sort of a cure is against what they want.
Yeah.
That's why I'd go. And obviously Joel would still be involved as well somehow through flashbacks or something. Sorry, what did you think? I asked you first.
So I've got two things. So first one is just in terms of where I think they should take a third one. For me, I think they leave Ellie's story where it is. I I don't know how much trauma you can put that girl through, because I feel like she's been through too much.
Well, she's got to learn to play the guitar again.
This is true. Yeah. And I also feel like there's segments of the world I want to see more than another Ellie story. Like the whole third act being in Santa Barbara, or third act, final act, don't know. That whole bit being in Santa Barbara and sort of seeing another gang that are effectively like making like a slave trade of some sort.
Yeah, looks like it.
Super interesting, because it's a complete detour from where you thought that game was going to go.
Definitely.
And I think I'd love to see more of the world like that, like a little bit more fleshed out, kind of what other groups are there and who else has stories.
Did they hint in when they were in the California part? Did they hint? Wasn't there some graffiti? That I can't remember if that was for the Rattlers now or another group. But I remember thinking, who is that group? Maybe it was for the Rattlers, but I swear there was some little like more than one gang was mentioned there, as if to say like, okay, there's more stuff going down here.
It makes sense. But yeah, so I think that's what I'd like to see from third, is just to go in a completely different direction that I have no hang-ups on. If they want to chuck in at any point these characters come across Ellie.
Do you think it would work though if you advertised The Last of Us Part 3 without Ellie or anything to do with Joel? Do you think it would do well? Like if you put Abby on the cover, or even introduce another new character, do you think it would work? Do you think people would be interested in it? I'm sure people like you and I, like big fans, would play it no matter what. But because if you're going to do Abby now, you'd have to probably do the Abby that we left, like the maybe not so bulked up, or do you stick to your guns and keep that character with that look?
Yeah. I don't know.
They're going to do one, aren't they? They're going to have to do one. PlayStation 5 is going to launch, and they've, in 2 or 3 years' time, whether they do another, something original, or they're already thinking of a part 3. I would have to think you don't put a part 2 in the title, I think, without them being a part 3.
Yeah, I'd hope there is, and I hope people would have the kind of interest to just go, okay, it's all new characters, whole new world. Sure, let's just try it out.
Do you think there could be a prequel?
I had wondered that, but then I sort of don't want there to be, because as much as I love seeing a world fall apart, like post-apocalyptic stuff is my jam, I feel like part of what The Last of Us as a series does really well is fill you in on that through notes, like through artifacts, like reading how people's individual lives fell apart and how they dealt with it. I think to me is way more interesting than seeing. It's built a picture in my head of how the world went, and I'd be afraid that if they did it, I'd kind of lose that magic. So I don't know.
It'd be interesting for the third one to actually have a bit of, like, we're supposed to be talking about just The Last of Us 2, but it's hard not to think about the future. But actually, like, maybe with a little bit of hope, add it in at the beginning, maybe, and then it gets. I mean, I know you start in Jackson, you're pretty hopeful. Maybe things have started to turn the tide a little bit.
Yeah.
Then it falls to shit again.
Yeah.
Effectively. I don't know how that would work. I'm sure they have a plan, but
yeah, I think there's a lot of routes to take it. I think just for me, I'd prefer not. I'd prefer to just leave Ellie there. I feel like the ending was ambiguous as is, and I feel like if they answer where Ellie went, it changes that ending slightly. Okay. Also, then the second thing I was going to throw at you. So I haven't obviously got to the end of New Game Plus yet. However, I did read an article. Can't remember who published it, but it's not coming from me. Internet people, in case you're like, this person quoted this, and it said it shows a shot of when Ellie arrives back at the farm right at the end, and she's got Dina's bracelet on. Supposedly, when you're doing the final acts in Santa Barbara, she's not wearing the bracelet.
Okay. What? So you think that she's seen Dina again in between?
Yeah. The theory kind of suggested that it was like maybe she went back to Jackson before the farm and has somehow rekindled with Dina, got the bracelet on, and she goes back to the farm to effectively say goodbye to Joel. Because I can see it, like that whole segment it felt a little bit like, to me, as much as it was Ellie kind of going like, shit, Dina's not here, I then also think a lot of it was like, I'm leaving behind this whole chunk of me. Like it's time to let Joel rest, and that being I'm going to leave his guitar rather than take it with me and learn how to play guitar. I'm
Yeah.
leaving all my stuff that was connected to him. I'm starting anew with Dina, and that was it. It was done. So I don't know.
That's
So I'm curious.
interesting.
Yeah, when I get to the end, I'm obviously going to keep a keen eye on the bracelet and see if that's a thing. But I thought that was an interesting, really small detail that if that is accurate, I think that's very Naughty Dog to kind of just
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
so small detail to kind of go like, oh, okay.
I was set on the idea that she was pretty much done with Dina. I would until I was told about the bracelet thing from some rumor.
Yeah.
I thought when she walked off the farm, she was going somewhere different because A, I don't know if Dina would take her back. B,
Yeah.
I think that relationship was ruined. Basically, it was probably ruined before even Tommy showed up again. That was a pretty good twist as well, to be honest. Like
Yeah,
when the
Tommy's.
horse was there, I didn't. My instinct was not that it was Tommy. My instinct actually originally was that it was going to be Tommy's wife,
Yeah, Maria.
and she was the one who was going to be like, "You have to go." Well, actually, I thought it was the end of the game before the horse showed up. I thought I was just doing the end part, but I thought it was when I thought, who is it going to be? I thought it's probably going to be Tommy's wife. She's going to be upset about Tommy because she made them promise that he was going to be safe, and they're like, "You have to go and finish what you started," basically. So when I saw Tommy, I was like, "Hey," because at that point, pretty much everyone every side character almost has died, haven't they?
Yeah.
Like I was super shocked when what's Abby's friend called? Manny. Was it Manny?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
When
Pretty sure.
he died, I was like, "Fuck."
Yeah.
Assuming we're swearing on this podcast,
Yeah.
but I was like, "Right, he's gone." That was because
Yeah.
I just thought he was going to be like around. Like I got used to him. Um, obviously, I was attached to him more than I thought I was when he died because it felt like he came out of nowhere.
Yeah. He's the only one that Ellie doesn't get to. Or
Yeah,
like
that's true. Actually,
doesn't see that he's dead because like Ellie obviously, I think she kills Jordan. He's like the first one that she goes, and then Jordan's girlfriend, I think, is the one she finds in the TV tower, which she didn't
yeah,
kill. The Scars did,
yeah.
and I think Manny. I remember playing through that second half, and I was like, I have no idea whether he's still alive when
Always.
Abby gets to the theater.
Yeah,
And then it's sort of you get to a point I think where it's Tommy and he's like sniping, and you both have to run, kind of like weave in and out while Tommy snipes, and that's
yeah.
when you see him die. I'm pretty sure anyway. Could be wrong, but
Manny dies he dies via a sniper, doesn't he? The
yeah,
sniper
yeah,
shoots him, but that felt quite soon. But I tell you, when we talk about like how things just flowed, and one of the things that I actually felt really sad for her in a way is the lady at the hospital, Abby's friend, who like helps Abby down to the floor where the eventual monster boss thing is. I can't remember her name. I think she's a doctor. But
is
she
it the one that Ellie really goes at?
yeah, she gets infected eventually.
Yeah,
She
Nora.
Ellie like pushes her in a room full of spores,
Yeah,
and then like in the trailer it's in it looks like a red room, but then in the thing
it's a
it's
warning
Ellie
light.
actually looking down,
Yeah,
and she batters her basically.
yeah,
But obviously she's super nice to Abby, isn't she? Like in the hospital,
yeah.
and like
She really helps out.
she really, and then but then moments later when Abby's probably down there and she's probably escaped or got out of the hospital, like Ellie's there moments later,
Yeah,
and she knows Abby's been there, and then
yeah,
she has to run, and you see both sides of it. It's so weird as well because you
yeah,
understand her logic of going on this like journey with Abby to get Joel, because they all believed that this doctor was going to save the day.
yeah.
I mean,
It's
everyone would think that, wouldn't they? As well. I'm going off sidetracking again, but anybody would be pissed off with someone like Joel if you just heard a word of mouth that some guy killed the only guy that was potentially going to get a cure for everything going wrong in the world.
yeah,
Then you'd be pissed off as well. You'd
yeah,
probably think like, "Hey, let's get our gear. Let's go and find this Joel guy. Give him a slap.
yeah. I,
Probably just a slap. I wouldn't kill him."
the interesting thing as well, I think, with Nora, is playing that through as Ellie, I think the way the dialogue is crafted between them, that's what really kind of almost when you're playing as Ellie, it feels like you've justified the way that she dies. Because I think when they bump into Nora, she's talking about Joel and she says like that bitch got what he deserved or something.
Yeah,
You're
he
like,
got what he deserved. Yeah,
and you as a player are like, fuck you, that's Joel, my
yeah,
mate,
yeah.
best friend.
Yeah, because when that happens, you don't know her at all, do you?
No,
You have no idea who she is or
yeah,
her links to Abby, because you're hunting down a gang essentially, aren't you?
yeah,
And also, you don't even know that you're going to play as Abby. Like I had no idea that I was going to play as Abby. So
no,
when I was playing through Ellie, again, why I thought like when I was at the end of Seattle, I was like, right, it's time to move on. We'll probably go back to Jackson for a cup of tea. But I thought we weren't going to be able to find all the leads of Abby, and then it was going to be the second part of the story. Like I said, probably end up back in Jackson, and then they find new leads, and you go in a different area. I had no idea I was going to play as Abby, and therefore, like you said, when Nora says, "Yeah, that little bitch got you would deserve," whatever she says, you are like, "I'm going to fucking kill you." Like,
yeah,
how dare you say
yeah,
that about my papa? I'm going to
yeah,
get you. You then see a completely different side of it, as you do with everyone on the second playthrough. Like
yeah,
you find when you're down fighting Ellie at the bottom of the theater, you generally don't like Ellie. She's sneaky, she's mean, and you kind of then you're like in Abby mode. You're like, right, I am pro Abby. Let's
yeah,
get Ellie. Let's
yeah,
deck her. And then and the character like Nora, you feel a bit sorry for. You feel sorry for Owen, like and Owen effectively, he's a big deal in this story as well. He's a huge deal, obviously, but
yeah,
he also has a very good side as well as obviously a bad side. But he's the one who actually leads Abby to where Joel is. Like
yeah,
he sets this huge thing in motion,
yeah.
as well. So
Yeah, I was about to say it's really interesting as well when you play through Abby's story that I was thinking the whole time, I was like, oh, it's going to be like a game of, like when I first started playing as Abby, it's a game of cat and mouse. It's how Ellie is right on the heels of Abby. But it sort of isn't. Besides the hospital and I guess the aquarium to an extent, Abby in her own right is just off on a completely different journey with Lev.
yeah,
It's not like she's encountering, like she obviously encounters Nora moments before she dies, I guess, but she's not just encountering these people just moments before Ellie gets to all of them.
because she
It's a,
doesn't know. Again, she doesn't know, does she?
yeah, like
It's like
the
cat and
first
mouse.
bit.
Like she has no idea.
Yeah, like I think the first bit she has when she gets to like the only reason she bumps into Tommy is because she's trying to get, I think, a boat for her and Lev to get to an island. I think that's why she goes down to the dock.
Yeah, does yeah.
Which is a Lev, plot point. It's not an Abby plot point. And also, I think the first time that she finds out that any of her friends are dead will be Owen and Mel when she gets back to the aquarium.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
And when she
so
gets into the theater and she sees that's when she sees the list, isn't it? She sees all
yeah,
the crosses on the name. So
yeah,
that's a huge imagine
yeah,
if that is the other way around. Imagine if Ellie found a list with Tommy and stuff crossed out.
yeah.
You'd be going for it, wouldn't you?
There's also, I think, one of the things that hit me the hardest for this game is the score.
Score's great.
The score is amazing. Like I thought that for the first one, and I often when I'm writing, I listen to scores just because it's a little bit easier to write to than music sometimes. Anyway, so
You basically just listen to the Man of Steel score
and Batman vs Superman
all the time.
Yeah. So the score, but the way that when you hit a loading menu, like at the end of a chapter, and then it's like, here's a loading menu, where usually in loading menus, you're like, hurry up, I want to kind of play. For Last of Us, I found it was almost like a kind of like
Breather.
yeah, like I was glad to have a loading screen that took a bit of time because I was like,
Yeah.
really heavy.
I could not agree more. It's definitely one of the only times I can recall a loading screen actually being enjoyable, because it was like you get to process what just happened.
Yeah.
And then you're already thinking like, as soon as the screen opens, I'm gonna load up everything. I'm just gonna go for it. But it was good, and it was such a nice. Sounds really weird, but it was such a nice loading screen. It wasn't like I think that was what it was supposed to be as well. I think it was supposed to feel a bit like isolate, like distant and calming in a way.
It's just a complete decompression of what's happened before. But I find that a lot of that's through the score. That it sort of just gives you like, the score normally hits like a moment at the end of a chapter, and then it will sort of like play a little bit in the menu, and it sort of just keeps you immersed in the world where you're decompressing, but it's not like you're decompressing and then going, what am I going to have for dinner, or like what am I going to snack on?
Yeah, you're just thinking about you. You're
You're
zoned in.
purely thinking about the game.
Yeah, you're in. I mean, that we said about this before we started recording this yesterday, which is the score, but the visuals. Like when it's raining, like you feel. I mean, I played the game in the dark, basically on my own, just like, and I was wide in. And when it was wet and raining, and the game was what it was, when I finished playing, in my head I was like, I don't know what, I can't get out of that mode. Like I feel like I've been through hell right now, and it's not often that a game makes me feel like that as well. Like so immersed in the world, and it's definitely one of those games where you could sit down at 7 in the evening, and all of a sudden it's midnight, and because I searched everything I could, I hadn't really made any progress. I was stuck in Seattle for what felt like a lifetime, not in a bad way, but in what was. One thing I was going to say to you, I know you wanted to talk about it. You probably were going to actually come back to it, but you wanted to talk about the music with the guitar.
Oh my god!
The Take on Me.
Oh, I did that again last night. I played through that whole kind of like segment, and it had the same effect on me. Just the minute she picked up the guitar, and like obviously they played the Pearl Jam Future Days thing as like the intro to like playing all guitar, which immediately also makes me feel quite sad, because then I just think of Joel giving her the guitar and playing that for her.
I mean, that song hit me more than the Take on Me song.
Yeah, so it did the second time. First time, I was like, this is really nice. And so the Future Days bit, because I'd listened to that after or like during playing the game, because I was like, what is that song? Because it's really catchy. Then the second time playing it, when it opens up and Joel plays that song, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna cry.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? So I bet like a second run through, it's what's going down. So
yeah. The use of those two songs, I think, is just absolute perfection, and it feels very Last of Us. That Take on Me moment is, again, it's like similar kind of, everybody talks about it with the first one with the giraffe scene, that it's a moment of absolute beauty in a game that's just horrific.
Yeah.
And Take on Me is that, and so is the Future Days thing. Both of those just have these really nice, beautiful moments where you just focus in on something that's not infected or somebody trying to kill you.
I mean, they definitely tried to find their giraffe scene, didn't they? They tried to. I know they did almost a parody of it with the bones.
Yeah.
But it felt like there were a few, off the top of my head, I can't remember what made me feel like this is the giraffe scene here. The Take on Me, but obviously. But there were a couple of other moments I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is that moment. Like, this is the moment where you're supposed to think, whoa, like this is a big bit. I think there was one in the aquarium, maybe at one point, that was like, this is that kind of moment. Probably didn't resonate with so many people, because I think the time I felt it was an Abby and Owen moment.
Is it where they walk into the aquarium for the first time and they're walking out like the circle arch thing?
Yeah, I think it is something like that. I remember being like, whoa, that's a good moment.
I think we've mentioned it before, but the space capsule bit, that's definitely one of those moments. And I've just done that now, and the thing that I took away from it is the attention to detail. So did you do it where you were wearing an astronaut helmet when you were in the space capsule?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I was thinking about that. I was like, some people might not do that. Like,
I think you have to. Don't you have to?
I don't know, because I just automatically picked the space helmet and then just got into the capsule.
I think originally, well, not the first time I did it, was the only time I got to that bit. You can't go through the doors
without picking
until you put the helmet on. Yeah.
I wasn't sure it worked, but I was thinking, like, if they allow you to do that scene without the helmet, you really lose something.
I think you have to, because I think the idea, isn't it? I can't remember. You've just played it again, but isn't Joel looking at her like a loving father when she has the helmet on, almost to say like, she can't see him looking, or I can't remember if she's just like,
he gives her the tape, which is the launch, and then they sort of simulate what a launch, or like she imagines she's going through a launch. And the reason I was mentioning the helmet is that it's like the reflection, that it's like she passes the sun and then goes out into space, and that all changes with the lighting. But the thing that got me the most in terms of attention to detail was on the reflection of the astronaut helmet is the buttons for the space capsule, and they're like lit up, so it's as if the thing is fully going. It's not just like the outside world's changing, she's fully immersed.
She's going for it.
Space capsule. I was like,
it's such a good scene.
Yeah, it's amazing. And for me,
That
that's the giraffe scene.
that scene probably is the giraffe scene, isn't it? That's an even bigger giraffe scene. But that, like I said before, when you see the way Joel looks at Ellie in that scene, that moment there is when everything Joel has done up until that point, he thinks is worth it.
Yeah.
Like every moment, the way he was in the first game, to saving Ellie, to looking after her still, to settling down in Jackson.
Yeah.
For him, you imagine if you saw something flash before your eyes from what you know, Joel, that would probably be the moment when he was probably thinking of that moment in my head.
Yeah.
Before he got his head smashed in.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier on, is that when you play that segment, you're like, this is absolutely beautiful. And then the segment ends with the shot of the fireflies and it's like liar. And you go like, that's Joel. He's the liar. Like he's lied to you in that moment. And it's about the fireflies. Like that whole thing is just connected, which is just brutal.
No, sorry, you go. Yeah, it is brutal. Another thing as well that I read or someone talked to me about is that obviously there's no concrete evidence to say in this world, or what we know, that the Doctor would have made it work either.
That's true. I've never thought about that.
He could have killed Ellie, and everything could just be he's just doing this off what, like a theory that he thinks he could find a cure from the evidence he's gathered. Evidence, obviously, he has a sense, and everyone believes him. But he's leading an organization as well, isn't he? Like the Fireflies are the main bad guys in the first one, obviously, and in this you see a bit more of what they were trying to accomplish through violence generally. But you don't know if it's going to work. So Joel, for him, he's probably thinking, well, yeah, but is it like, is it going to work? Like, is it worth sacrificing this, like, this girl for this? And that rings through my head sometimes when I think, is it like the future, like the future game, especially, like maybe all of it is like, imagine if Abby found out that it was never going to work, or like her dad had an agenda. I don't think he did, but there's a lot of different layers to it. And that is something else I was going to say, or a question I was going to ask you, which isn't on our notes. But if you could, would you rearrange the story? And do you think if you could rearrange a story, that other players wouldn't have critiqued it so badly, in terms of if you had the Joel killing, like so let's say you started as Abby earlier on, and you think you get the Abby stuff kind of done a little bit, but then you're Ellie, so you resonate with Abby a little bit earlier. I don't think you could have done it another way, really. But maybe it's a stupid question, really. But if you have Jackson bit at the beginning, and then you have Abby finding Jackson, but then you go on like a longer stint with Abby, and then you have a bit of Ellie, and then if it worked a little bit more that way, so maybe people would have been like, oh yeah, he started as this new character, and that's how it was almost portrayed a little bit, but you didn't know much about Abby.
I think I probably wouldn't change, not that I'm ever going to be this level of writing, but I wouldn't change anything in terms of that, the story, because I think the story is presented in such a perfect way. I think I wonder if the leaks hadn't happened, whether there would have been as much of a backlash, because a lot of the backlash seems to be from the leaks, that it was like people saw.
What were the leaks? Because you told me about the leaks. You hadn't read the leaks. I muted everything on Twitter.
Yeah, I was exactly.
Which is the only social media I really use, and I muted every word like "Last of Us." Like if there was any real apocalypse, and it was like, right, you're the last people here, I wouldn't have known about it on Twitter because I muted everything. Or if anyone called Joel was trying to get in touch with me, that was done. But I didn't know anything. I had no idea what happened. All I roughly knew is that there was word that something had gone on at the studio of Naughty Dog. Someone had come out and spoke about it. But I still to this day haven't looked at what the leaks were. But I assumed it was. I thought after I played it that it must have been Joel's death.
Yeah, from what I can understand, it was. Obviously I didn't see them at the time either. I sort of read that it happened, and then immediately on Twitter I was like, nah, nothing. And then when I finished the game, I was really curious about what they were. So I tried to go back and find them, but obviously they've been removed because it's been ages since it happened. But from reading around it, what it was I think it was player segments where you play as Abby. So it sort of revealed that you do play as another character. And then they also showed the Joel's death scene. And so the two of those put together, people were like, oh, Joel dies and you play as his killer. Like, I'm not going anywhere near this game because that's ridiculous. So I do wonder whether if people hadn't seen that, then people would have bought the game and then played through it, got to that Joel bit, and fair enough, they would have been like, "Fuck you, that's really annoying." But maybe they then would have continued with it because they would have been like, "Well, I've got it. I've just got to play it." You know, in terms of swapping the story around, the only thing that I could think you could do, it would be a clusterfuck, and it's really weird to think of the story in this way, is to reverse the game almost completely. And so you switch out day one, like you do day one Abby, day one Ellie, day two, you do it like that. And the whole time, the mystery of the game is like, why do these two people want to kill each other? What has happened?
Yeah.
And you'd probably guess early on, you tweak dialogue, I guess, and whatever about Joel. That would be the clusterfuck bit. And then you'd ultimately pinpoint it like halfway through the game that it's like Abby killed Joel. And then the rest of the game is like, okay, so here's how it's going to go down. That's probably the only thing I'd do if you ever thought about swapping around. But I genuinely think that would break the game. I think
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah, I think the story is crafted in this exact way for a reason, and I think it's perfect as it is in terms of symmetry and thematically. Everything links for this version. If you move that around, then it just doesn't function. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the portrayal of the infected in this, because like in the first one, they're terrifying, and there are moments where I just remember playing it, I was like, oh fuck, run. This game, I feel like, just completely elevates that to another level of me just wanting to run around the room with my controller actually running away from infected.
There is some genuinely, like, it's easy for me to say, trying to sound tough, but generally I don't scare easily in games. But there were definitely 2 or 3 moments where I felt out of control of the situation, to the point where I was like, I cannot craft something quick enough. I'm like, I'm running and I'm crafting and I'm out. And so many times as well with infected, but also just the Seraphites or the wolf gang. Are they called wolf, aren't they?
Yeah, wolves.
Yeah, wolf. Yeah. I would do a section and I would use all my ammo and I think, right, that's that bit done. And then I'd like hop over a fence and I'd be like, oh shit, that was just the warm up. And I've got a bottle which could lower like a clicker away if I'm lucky. But they upped the ante, because in the first one they had clickers, infected, runners, and they had bloaters.
Bloaters, yeah.
But in this one, there weren't any bloaters, were there?
I can't remember. I feel like maybe there was, like maybe 1 or 2, just somewhere.
I don't remember any bloaters.
I don't remember. I just remember the Shamblers, which are obviously the new thing, and they're horrible.
So with the Shamblers, because like you and I both said, I didn't know anything going in. It's the first time you're with Dina and you're in the crate above, and you see these 2 Shamblers, like you hear them.
Yeah, grim.
And I remember thinking, right, I've got a shotgun, and I've got this, and I've got that. So I just went nuts on them. And then I remember going over to them, and they're like on their knees, and I'm like, right, I'm gonna shoot this in the head. And then it just went, and I was like, I'm burning. Like, what is going on? So I remember the second time thinking, oh, right, okay, so something must have got me from behind. Like, I saw the mist, and I thought something must have thrown something at me. So I did exactly the same thing. I went up, I was like, right, nothing else is behind me. I'm gonna, it was like, and then, and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's like killing me when it explodes.
Yeah.
Although, if I just paid attention to there's a note, I think, just before. It's like explaining. There's like a body that's burnt when you walk in the red room. And I was like, oh, I should have just read that properly, but I just skipped it. But yeah, but the Shamblers and the Stalkers.
Stalkers were like really
Stalkers.
Creepy.
They're the worst. I mean, put me in a room with all the clickers and all the Shamblers in the world. But the Stalkers, because obviously when you go into a room, when you clear it, you get a bit of a soundbite. You get like, is that all of them? Or is it like, and that's the bit when you're like, good, I can go and loot the room and look around everything. And most of the time, nothing's going to come out. That first time you walk in with the Stalkers, because they weren't in the first game.
No.
Were they?
No.
No.
Yeah, they were new.
And I walked in and they're all like munching away, having a bit of lunch. And then it's like a square room. And I remember thinking, right, looking at that, there's 5 or 6 here or whatever it was. and I'd gone everywhere, and a couple of them had crept up me, and I thought I got rid of them, but the uncomfortableness of knowing there was one more in the room, maybe two, and not being able to find it, and not even hearing it, like, where is it? So I actually got to the end of the room, and when I got there was one waiting behind the bookcase by the window. So I got rid of that one, and there was still no, you've cleared the room. And in my head, I'm thinking, I need all the loot I can get.
Yeah.
And it's the first time in a game for a long time where I actually stood on the outside. I went through the window, and I was like having to gear myself up. Like, I'm going to go back in now. Like, this is it. This is going to separate the men from the boys. In I go. And then looking around the corner and being like, no. Let's just rein it back. Let's come back and let's see if I can lower this guy to me. There were bits like there's a bit when you go through the wall and a clicker comes at you.
Yeah.
And like you said about your control, I nearly dropped my control.
Yeah. I think it's also just I guess it's because obviously it's on the PS4 now, so they can develop for it, but also the quantity of them. Like,
yeah, a lot.
The fact that there are so many more, like playing through that opening section and get like as Abby, there's the bit where you're just before you meet Joel and you crawl like along a fence that's slowly collapsing due to the amount of infected.
Yeah, very like Walking Dead felt.
Yeah, that's terrifying because you're just like, oh fuck, come on, and just really, really well kind of like visually made, like with the close up on the camera and just slowly seeing this gate sort of bend into shot. You're just like, fuck. And it's the same with Ellie and Dina when you get to the scene where Ellie cracks her like gas mask, and Dina's like, "Oh fuck!" Like, and then there's just so many of them,
Yeah, it's huge amounts,
and
that's intense because even though you know you're going to get away, especially in the button smashing bits, like most of the time you know you're going to get away, but it still feels like you're not. Like that clicker is going to eat my head.
So that whole thing is just terrifying. Like this second time doing New Game Plus, the bit where like having just done the Shamblers, I was way more prepared for it. So I was like, right, shotgun, trap mines, these areas.
Because you have your weapons, don't you? Obviously.
Yeah, like you've got everything, so bring it on.
Nothing.
But yeah, so I was like, right, I'm going to set up like 3 trick mines here, and then I'm going to wait in the corner with a shotgun, and I'm going to take them all out. And it was great. It was just fine, easy. They're still grim, and just looking at them is like, that's disgusting. But then in the back of my head, and I guess this is kind of what we're leading to with the infected, is knowing that I've got to go do the hospital fight, where whatever that thing is just absolutely horrifying. The only time I've been that kind of freaked out in a game is Alien Isolation, and it's completely
good old
different.
Alien.
Yeah, like I haven't finished that game because it's too terrifying for me. Like that's a different level of fear. That's more like there's one thing coming for me. I just don't want to move, so therefore I don't want to play this game because I'm just going to stand.
That's a consistently okay level of fear in Alien Isolation.
Yeah, I'm basically just on that game, just standing in a locker for 3 hours, and then like, cool, that was a good gaming session. I'm done. Cool. Whereas like Last of Us is like, I have to keep running and shooting because this thing is coming for me.
I went the wrong way. When you're running from it originally, and I went straight ahead, and I did that again. I did that a couple of times in a row, and it's pretty grim when it catches you. It's not like I just bashed you on the head, it like rips your neck in half.
Yeah.
And I was like, where am I going wrong? But you had no time. You had no time to really think.
Yeah.
Right. Did I miss something? And then all I had to do was go left instead of straight. I thought originally when you first go to the hospital and you hear it behind the door, because you can obviously hear it. You can hear it. You can sense it. So you can see the outline of it. I don't know if you did that.
Yeah.
So you saw like a huge thing. But I kind of thought it was just like a bigger shambler.
Yeah,
like
I thought it was.
I thought it was just shambler. So when you see it at the back of the ambulance, I was just like, shit. And again, was not well equipped. Like I'd used the clickers during the rooms just before that, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take my sweet time with these guys. I'm just gonna unload a few things on them. Because I got into the habit eventually of just giving up on stealth. I would just like leave like traps when I was Ellie, and with Abby, I would just. There's one specific scene like part where you are, I think, you're Abby, and you're going through. You're trying to get to a certain area, but you kind of go through like bedrooms and stuff, and you have to jump down from this, going from like building to building basically. And in this glass room, you can see there's clickers and there's a shambler. And I dropped down there the first time, and I tried to stealth it, but I messed it up. Like I bashed the window, and everything came at me. But then I just was like, I can lob a brick through the window from up here, and I can just take them out like sitting ducks.
Yeah.
So I got used to doing that sort of stuff, like more gung ho, like
interesting.
Make a lot of noise, bring them towards one location, and then just go to town on them.
I was sort of the opposite. I think I spent a lot of the time stealthing, and funnily enough, I'm still doing that on New Game Plus as well.
I think I'll do it more on New Game Plus because I have the weapons and stuff. It's probably going to be more
backup. Yeah,
and that's the catch, isn't it, with New Game Plus? Because a lot of people probably could be bothered with it, but there's something quite satisfying about having your arsenal ready.
Yeah, just in case.
Like out. if you're Abby and you start with a flamethrower, then
haven't thought about that.
The first infected that shows up, you're going to flamethrower them.
Yeah.
Because you can pick up that stuff. Obviously, you're picking up the ammo before. It was like saying it was full because you didn't have the weapon. So the infected did, they definitely up the ante on the infected, but also the viciousness of the human villains as well.
That was actually something that I was going to talk about, and especially on this second playthrough, that I'm noticing it more. Like I remember saying at the time when I was playing the first, I was like, "That's a really nice detail where all the characters have names." And so when you kill someone, the person across the room is like, Sarah! And you're like...
Yeah, they shout out their name,
They've got a name. They're a human being.
That's the third game. Those Billy's just trying to get revenge.
But because I've been playing this second playthrough with headphones on, because it's been super late at night when I've been playing through it, and I've had like the surround sound on the headphones, I've been hearing the people die, which is an absolutely horrific sound. Like, especially when you're Ellie and you sneak up on someone and like stab them, it's just grim. Or like, I did it earlier on, I shot somebody with an arrow, and their death just went on for felt like ages. Just like, ah!
But that's the thing, when you grab someone around the neck and you shiv them or you strangle them, it's not quick, is it? Because half the time you're like, oh my god, please die, like I want you to die now so I can hide in the long grass. It's
horrific,
brutal.
And I think that's the thing, that getting to the hospital scene, having headphones on with surround sound, it's just going to be absolutely grim, because the sound that thing makes is just like
I mean, I had headphones on, and I was just when it first rumbled, I was like, I don't know what that is, and Abby was like, oh, what was that? And I was like, probably Shamblers. But I had no idea where I was going in that room either. And I tell you another bit that made me jump, and I can't think it wouldn't have made anyone else jump, is when you've killed the boss, which I now know is called the Rat King, which I don't quite get, but maybe it's just because it's infected mixed with rats. I have no idea. But after you've got rid of him and you go up the vent, you chase the thing that's fallen off him. When that jumps out at you, and you do like a roly-poly down. And it took a while to kill as well. It wasn't like a quick kill. It was like, again, I was like, I used all my ammo on this giant thing. And I don't have much left, really. So it took a while to maneuver.
I was definitely really lucky because I'd been stealthing a lot of that. And also, I think my kind of go-to was I'd usually chuck a bottle and then Molotov groups of things. I was
together. I mean, the bottles were... I know they were in the first game, and actually I didn't use them that much at the first half of this game, but I think second playthrough I'd use them a lot more, but definitely the second half of the game I used them a lot. Like, I was like, I really need a bottle right now to especially in like the hotel where you're descending down after you fall in the pool when you're going down.
That level design is incredible as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so good.
Yeah.
Easy to get lost in though as well. Like, that's what's clever about the game. Like, there was a couple of times where I had to circle back. I was like, I've done this room. And then, and the amount of times where you're looking at the big piles of like the massive infected crap on the wall, and you're like, is there a stalker in there? I learned quite quickly to kind of look for clothes, but sometimes I'd go up to and be like, oh yeah, there's nothing there, and then sometimes I'd be like, yeah, there's nothing. I'd like waste a bullet shooting nothing, and then I'd go to the next one and there'd be something in there. But I'm really looking forward to playing it again, to be honest.
Actually, that's a good point with the infected as well. Like, the stalkers are really creepy, but also the ones that are like molded into the wall. Yeah, they really freak me out, because it was just that's the one, I realized you could like see them if you do like the hearing mode. You can kind of see the outline of them.
Oh, can you? I didn't even know that.
I'm pretty sure. Anyway,
I was just shooting. Every time I saw one, I wasted a silent bullet on it just in case.
Yeah, they were really creepy, and especially in that hotel scene, because that whole thing is just very claustrophobic, and also everything is just falling apart. So it doesn't feel like you can necessarily like run away from things, because
Yeah.
run and then just fall or whatever.
That's a huge thing as well. We talk about like the atmosphere and the music and the rain and how like you feel like you're in this world. But when I came out of the hotel scene, and you're kind of like, thank God I'm not only on solid ground, but I'm outside.
Yeah, yeah,
Like there's going to be humans out here. At least they're not going to try and eat me.
yeah.
They're going to try and kill me. But
And that's also a good thing as well. Just carrying on then, the human part of it, which I know you were talking about before, and I really want to mention the scars, the seraphites.
yeah,
Their whistling
the
is
whistling is a nightmare.
oh, it's so like the pitch of it. Just the minute I hear it, I'm like, and here comes an arrow. And again, it's Abby as well, being on the island. Um, that whole kind of sequence is just incredibly epic. Like the end of it, where you're on the horse and you're just going through a burning like village.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
this is
such a crazy bit as well. Like it's
yeah,
so it's again that's such a Naughty Dog like such a Naughty Dog image. Like makes me think of Uncharted 4
yeah.
especially.
It's a huge
Um,
like set piece. But then in
yeah,
the
it
middle
is.
of
Yeah,
it, the bit that I absolutely love is where you've obviously got all this gear and you suddenly encountered Ellie. And so in the back of my head, I was thinking, I was like, why, when she shows up at the theatre, does she not just pull out the flamethrower? She's just
yeah,
like, I'll burn this place down. And then obviously you encounter that like brute, and she loses all of her weapons there. And
yeah.
it's like, oh fuck, like that's really
Get
smart.
it.
Paid attention to that kind of like detail, and also just did it in a story led part. It wasn't just like she'd gone back, put her gear down, seen and Mel was dead, and then she was like, fuck, I've just got to go, and just left it behind.
You got to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she actually lost it all. It just doesn't have. Yeah, the Seraphites I thought were really cool, and it just unlike any other human character I'd encountered in a video game as well. Like that whistling system, I don't feel like I've encountered in another video game where it's kind of.
I mean, again, even with the wolves, like because you spent a bit of time in there, like where they live, basically, like with the dogs, and you play fetch with the dogs, and you talk to some of the people, and you see their world, and you see how wild they've done for themselves. Like, you killed half of them, like when you were Ellie. It's really, it's it's crazy how many gangs there would be in that sort of world if it was to happen,
Yeah,
and like how you would think your gang is right. Like the wolves
yeah,
probably think they're all doing the right thing, but then Isaac was a bit of a, he was a bad man, obviously.
yeah.
Um,
Also, Jeffrey Wright playing that character, that completely
yeah,
blew me away. The moment I was hearing
yeah.
his voice, I was like, that's Jeffrey Wright.
I didn't know he was involved
Yeah,
until I saw the art of the Last of Us book.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Big casting. But yeah, and then I guess all this kind of like leads to that third act or final act in Santa Barbara. And obviously we talked a little bit about the Rattlers, but there's two kind of big things I want to talk about with that last segment. First one,
yeah,
when Ellie gets strung up, and then like the thing stabs her in the chest, and then loses a finger. Just that whole
it's grim.
yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking is when I was like, I don't want another story about Ellie, because I was like, after all of that, just like let her just go and live her life.
Actually, you say that when she got stabbed. One thing that I did get told by accident going into this game, I got told when I was about halfway through that Ellie died.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what someone said to me, and I remember being like so gutted that someone had told me that.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, actually, I don't know if I'm right or not." But when you say something by accident and you backtrack a little bit,
Yeah.
I was like, "Great." So it wasn't confirmed,
Yeah.
but
It was
in
in the
my
back of your
head,
head.
it was in the back of my head. So when she got stabbed, when she got strung up, she's like holding on and it's re-bleeding, and then she's going through these things. I thought she was going to almost die getting to like she was going to die just as she got to her, and then maybe she would forgive her. Something would happen. So when she lived, that was actually quite a nice surprise
Yeah.
in the end. But I completely get what you're saying. Like she's like she's done. Like she's done enough now. Like she can't. What could she go through now? And because she's got no one really to fight for now either. If her and Dina are done,
Yeah.
She doesn't have that huge connection. The only thing that I think would spur her on to do more, going out for something other than, well, there's two things going back to where we started now, but you need to get back to the final bit, is that she either goes to put herself on the line to be the cure, or Jackson has to burn to the ground. She has to be like, right. But the whole Santa Barbara thing that's when the humans were more brutal. Like you saw a really dark side with this Rattlers group with the chained up infected and
it was just stuff. It was really uncomfortable. And I love that the game took it to that kind of direction, but also just going back and playing as Ellie the minute, you know, she kind of says to Dina that she has to go and do it. Just as the player, you're kind of like, don't, like, just don't, like, please just don't go do this. Like, Abby's got Lev, you've got Dina and JJ, like, you've got to go for it. Pretty sure, just side note, by the way, I saw something that said that JJ wasn't for Jesse Jr.
I read it was for Joel and Jesse.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's a really nice touch. I hadn't thought about it. The first time I played through it, I was like, oh, it's Jesse Jr. And then I was like, oh, somebody said Joel.
Yeah. Nice that they have two like the two names symbolize that at the end. Did you think, just with you saying about like the Santa Barbara thing in it was good what it was, do you think it was too long, like the game itself?
No,
overall?
God, no. I don't think there's any segment that I'd probably cut from the game. There's nothing that I'd kind of go, this doesn't have some relevance or weight to the story or characters, or nothing I can think of anyway.
Okay.
How about you?
I've definitely read some people saying like Abby's bit was too long and it made the game go on too much, but I agree with you. I mean, I could have carried on. Okay. I generally could have carried on. I would have loved to carry on. Like, you are ready to finish it as well. I think when you get to that point, you kind of like, you can't do it again. You can't have another Abby tracking Ellie or Ellie tracking Abby. Like,
yeah, and I think as well, just the that kind of bit where Ellie gets to Abby, and she kind of gets her down, and then you walk with Abby to the boat, and there's like that bit where I think you're trying to climb up like a small, like,
and you're too wounded.
And I kind of felt like that represents the player, that it's like the player's kind of going like,
yeah, we're done, I'm tired.
This journey's been fucking harrowing and heartbreaking in every way. I just need you guys to go home now. Like, I need you to bury the hatchet and just go. And so I think when it does get to Ellie, and she kind of you see Lev and Abby get on the boat, and then Ellie like starts to sort out her boat, and then there's just a flash of Joel, and you kind of go like, fuck. And then she turns around and she's like, I'm going, like, you got to go
carry on.
And then the minute where I was like, Ellie, you've gone too far, is when she threatened Lev. That it was like, I was like, fuck you, Ellie. Just let the fucking thing go. Just stop.
But then it's interesting that you playing as Ellie in that bit as well, because you just invested so much time into Abby as well. Like, I don't know if I felt quite right being either of them at that point. Maybe it would have been a good cinematic to just see.
I think as well, like, I think that shows just how well the story's crafted and the characters are done, because I think there's very few games where you understand both sides of the person that you're fighting or playing as, that you're kind of like, neither of them are really in the right. I probably lean more towards Abby in this moment because she's got Lev, and Ellie has kind of annoyed me by, ditching Dina and continuing this fight. So I feel more for Abby, but also I don't want Ellie to die, because I've spent so much time with Ellie that I know she's a good person, or kind of, good-hearted in some way.
I think it ended on the right. Both of them making it out probably ended on the right thing. And like I said, I was quite relieved to know that Ellie didn't die after all of it, because that's again, like, there's so many people that did die during the game.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the start screens, obviously, that we said.
Yeah, which is stunning. Like, playing like the first time you load it up and you've just got the misty kind of screen with the boat. It's so atmospheric.
It sets the tone.
Yeah,
so well.
Immediately like fuck.
There's nothing fancy about it. There's not any real music. Like, it's not like a G you up music. It's just like, you just know as soon as that boat's there, you see that thing for the first time, you're like, this is going to be like crushing.
Yeah, and the magic of going through on a New Game Plus, knowing the whole story, then you kind of look back on bits of the rest of the game in a different way. And so I think I said to you before that when I finished the game and you've got the closing shot of the guitar, I was like, oh, did the game open on a guitar as well? And so then playing it on New Game Plus, it's like, oh, it does. The symmetry is there with literally the shot. It's the exact same thing. The first time playing that, going from that main menu, which is just so atmospheric, to then going to the guitar, and the opening scene being Joel telling Tommy about what he did, I was like, that's a perfect way to open this game, is that you're addressing the exact thing that happened at the end of the first game. It was like the biggest thing to kind of happen in that game, and to kind of cripple the player, because this is one of the things that I think I was struggling with in terms of how do you do that a second time around. Is in the first one, you play as Joel, you're like, he's the hero, and then he makes that decision to save Ellie. And at the first time I played that, I was so annoyed. I just remember being like, I love the game until that last moment, because I wish it had been a player choice. Like, I wish it had been a player choice to save Ellie or not. And I probably wouldn't have saved Ellie, because I feel like it was the right thing to do, as sad as that is. It's not an option. You just have to go with it. And so I was like, how do you then replicate that feeling with a sequel? How do you get to the point of going, I'm playing as somebody who's doing something that I don't want to do? And the game does that over and over with the second one, but in a variety of ways that just make you feel uncomfortable, but you have to play it. You're so addicted to it. And I feel like, with the main menus, that's what these two things represent, is that the kind of murkiness of it is you going into it and going like, this is going to be heavy, and I know I'm going to come out of it almost with a different view of these characters that have been in my world for so long. And so when you finish it and you've got the sun as well as a boat on a beach instead of just adrift, and you kind of know that Lev and Abby made their thing, you're a bit like, okay, everything is in its right place. And
do you think that signifies the end? Like, do you think that could be that's done? Like,
I think
this game.
Yeah, I think for part 2 anyway. And I think if you wanted to do part 3, I think you've got the story there with Abby and Lev. As much as I'm sure that would be controversial, I think there's a story to tell there about Fireflies. Almost like as a resurgence group of some sort.
Has to go full circle, doesn't it? It doesn't feel to me like it's full circle. Like, I think it started heavily with the Fireflies, and it needs to end with Ellie and the Fireflies, or Abby and the Fireflies.
Yeah, I feel like the Fireflies are at the heart of it, and I think whatever they do with the third, it should involve them. But whether or not Ellie or Abby is a playable character, I think I'd almost prefer, like I was saying earlier on, for them to just stumble across one of them, and you sort of get a bit of the backstory there that you're like, oh, okay, so in this time they've done this or whatever. But they're not going to be central characters. It's more just that there's somebody in that world that you encounter.
It'd be interesting to come across Ellie as someone who's trying to round up or find people like her.
Yeah.
Like a Professor X type.
Yeah.
Like
having a school.
Trying to find anyone that could be like her. Although that's far-fetched, because it's only a small part of the world as well. That's the thing. Like,
I'd be so curious to know what the rest of the world looks like, like Europe, or, even just somewhere like Japan. I say that just because I'm Ghost of Tsushima. But, just to see how other parts of the world dealt with this pandemic. And maybe that's how you do a prequel, is that you'd show Outbreak Day, but completely different perspective, like a different place in the world. And so you have none of those kind of background stories that you already have from the first game. You've just got a whole new different way of dealing with it.
I mean, they could obviously do that, but mention the Fireflies, like we've heard. Like, well, I suppose it'd have to be a lot later than Outbreak Day, but but would be nice. A prequel eventually, but I would definitely take a part 3 first. or a prequel.
Yeah, I'd also like this will never happen because it's video games and people always want to craft like massive video games or whatever. But I'd love it if The Last of Us could be like short stories. Like if
Yeah.
you could release a game, but instead of it is just one long campaign, it's like 20 short stories that are all loosely linked in some way, but it's all these characters that exist in the same world.
Yeah.
I think, and you could have Ellie as one of them and Abby as one of them, if you wanted to, but also you could just show off so many different parts of this world.
It'd be nice to do a DLC, wouldn't it? I think I read
Yeah.
somewhere that they're not going to do a DLC, but it would
Yeah,
be
I
nice for
don't-
them
yeah.
to signify maybe they could do a short story based on something else, part of the world. So I think that covers everything to do with The Last of Us 2 that we wanted to talk about. There's probably loads more. I could definitely talk and talk and talk and talk. I thought it was such a great game, as you did as well, Nick.
Yeah.
So we hope to do more of these podcasts in the future. We're going to try and aim to do them weekly. Our next podcast is going to be a subject that means quite a lot to Nick and I in the comic world, which is Scott Snyder, who is an amazing comic writer. He's done numerous Batman comics, American Vampire, currently writing Undiscovered Country. So we aim to kind of dive into what his Batman run has been in terms of from beginning to the end, what it means to us.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited to talk about that. I think in the same way that I'm really passionate about The Last of Us and the way that game's being crafted, I think Scott, as well as everybody that works with on all of his books, I think they craft something that's really similar where it's really immersive.
So if you enjoyed listening to us talk about The Last of Us 2, you're interested in coming back and listen to us talk about Scott Snyder's Batman run in the DC Comics, then please listen.
We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.